Hello there, I'm Chuck Todd, and welcome to another episode of Meet the Press Reports. So how did a writer and a radio talk show host become the creator of a conservative curriculum being adopted by a growing number of states? Talk radio host Dennis Prager came to believe our public schools spend too much time on things like policing language and not enough time on what makes America great. In other words, he argues they're too woke. So he created PragerU. These are videos designed to create an alternative to the American curriculum. But a lot of people look at PragerU's videos and see a whitewashing of unattractive parts of American history. NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton spent weeks looking into PragerU, talking to both its advocates and critics. Antonia, what did you learn?
Well, Chuck, we went behind the scenes of PragerU's operations to understand the controversial edutainment company's vision for American education. Beyond the shiny studios, bright lights, and cartoons was a belief that our country is at war, that there is a battle between good and evil, and our children and their education are the front lines.
Action.
Time to read Otto's Tales. Let's meet a police officer. Wee-woo, wee-woo.
In a studio tucked away in an unassuming corner of Los Angeles, creators and illustrators are churning out content for kids.
You think about PragerU.
Under the direction of a former educator turned CEO, Marissa Straight.
All right, so these are our editors, our illustrators. They feel like they have found a home here at PragerU.
Some ditched careers at Nickelodeon and Disney, drawn by the self-described pro-American patriotic values of nonprofit media company PragerU.
How did you recruit them? How did they find out about PragerU?
They have young kids. They themselves are upset with what they're seeing that is produced in our culture. They feel like they're serving on the front lines of saving the war of ideas in America.
Schools are supposed to empower students to maximize their full potential, not their sexual potential.
That's right.
But behind the shiny studios and kid-friendly content is a dark view of the direction of our country. For many conservatives, our current culture war is a battle between good and evil, right and left. This idea fuels book bans and bills in dozens of states seeking to restrict how teachers can talk about race, gender, and tough chapters of our history.
There's a difference between teaching slavery and teaching our kids that America is institutionally racist, and because you have a certain skin color, you're likely today to be treated like garbage. Why don't we teach them that they should be victors, not victims?
For what it's worth, I wasn't ever made to feel like a victim just because I knew about the horrors of slavery.
Well, I think you should learn about the horrors of slavery. We do teach about the horrors of slavery, but I don't think that young Black Americans should be taught that there is no hope and that the system is set up against them. Why is it a good thing to teach your child that you live in a hole? That is not a good thing. There is so much look at you. Look at you. You're so successful.
I never said I thought I lived in a hole.
Founder Dennis Prager was raised in a Jewish community in Brooklyn, New York, and has shared his views on race and history as a controversial national radio host for years.
The left has made it impossible to say the N-word any longer. That's disgusting. It's a farce. It's the only word that you can't say in the English language. Of course, you should never call anybody the N-word. That's despicable.
His platform, founded in 2009, has operations in LA, Florida, and Nashville. Historians and educators warn that the content is distorted and is propaganda. And since the pandemic, they've more than doubled revenue and reached over 9 billion lifetime views.
We don't think they learn much in American schools. If you're spending a good part of the day teaching kids about preferred pronouns and other what we call woke issues, then you're really not teaching them.
What I hear from teachers of every background is that they are slammed from block to block. They are underpaid, they are underappreciated, and that they don't even have time to talk about pronouns, gender theory, critical race theory.
I don't believe that they're telling you the truth. I actually think they're lying to you.
You think all of the teachers are lying?
No, not at all. Look at the teachers' unions' positions. The teachers' unions are among the most radical groups in the United States of America.
PragerU's goal is to reach at least 20 hours of, quote, alternative edutainment on a weekly basis, and to add states like Texas to a list of official partners that includes Florida, New Hampshire, and Oklahoma. So are you just in a race for who can indoctrinate the kids first, who can win their hearts and minds?
To a certain extent, I guess you might have to put it that way. But I want their doctrines taught. They don't want ours taught.
It's really my pleasure and great honor to introduce to you a fellow warrior for truth.
Oklahoma State Superintendent of Education Ryan Walters is a proud PragerU Kids partner.
We literally have an education system that has been indoctrinating kids with radical left wokeism for decades.
But Tulsa, with its painful history of a racist massacre in 1921, is a diverse city in a conservative state.
This clarity.
Walters recently threatened their majority-minority Tulsa public schools with a state takeover if academic performance didn't improve.
We've sent a clear message to Tulsa Public Schools. Failure is not going to be an option. We need drastic changes. We need tough decisions made.
Ebony Johnson is the superintendent of Tulsa schools.
I can see why our families would feel like, whoa, why just Tulsa?
Your state superintendent, Ryan Walters, has announced a partnership with PragerU. Are Tulsa schools using PragerU videos?
We are not. We are so laser-like focused on the state-approved and adopted curriculum.
Do you think it's a possibility that at some point he will require that districts like yours use PragerU or other conservative content?
Yeah, I'm not sure. As far as, again, Superintendent Walters saying this shall be or this is what we're going to do, that'll be a bridge that we'll cross and have to process and understand once we get there.
Some Tulsa teachers are already using it, like elementary teacher Gabe Woolley, who played PragerU videos last year in the district.
I don't want my students to think and believe that slavery only happened in America and it only happened with these two groups of people, because that does not explain to them what slavery is.
Here's the first thing you need to know. Slavery was not invented by white people.
I will say, from the perspective of a Black American who's the descendant of slaves, it feels like in this video that's called A Short History of Slavery, like she's immediately on the defensive. And we're almost halfway through the video and there's no acknowledgement. She's giving credit mostly to white people right now for ending it, right, before the acknowledgement of the pain that some of your students might actually know about and feel in their families, right?
Right. And there's a lot of content that we cover that does cover that aspect.
On social media, I come across extraordinary depictions about how Africans lived like pharaohs before Europeans came and laid waste to their paradise. I wish any of this were true, but it's not. It's a fantasy.
Okay, I have to pause the video there because I also know that that wasn't completely accurate. There were massive libraries and inventions and unbelievable cultures, but she made it look as though there wasn't a culture, there wasn't a society there that if you're a Black student watching that, you might leave feeling like your culture was disrespected.
Yeah, and I think it's important for teachers to definitely be like holding a conversation. I want to make sure that what I'm showing is maybe filling in some gaps of things that we just don't hear commonly through history.
Woolley says he sees PragerU as a supplement, not substitute. He now teaches at a local charter school. He believes it's parents, not teachers, who should talk to kids about LGBTQ identities or movements like Black Lives Matter.
Some kids in the Tulsa area, they don't have great family lives. What if public school is the only place they can find a trusted adult to talk to about these issues? What if they need to learn about them from someone like you?
I think that there is an appropriate age and time for everything.
Families like the Reyes in another Tulsa area district say claims that Oklahoma teachers were bringing up controversial topics in class are false. What does trouble them? A string of anonymous bomb threats at their school.
Yeah, baby. Yeah.
This fall, a teacher posted a TikTok lampooning the accusation that teachers are trying to turn their kids woke. A right-wing TikTok account in the state superintendent, Ryan Walters, shared it without context.
When it becomes all about you and whatever agenda that you have in that moment, it's not about the kids anymore.
Then the district received 10 days of bomb threats within 1 month. Lindsay is a mom of 6. Her daughter Zoe is in the 5th grade.
It kind of scared me. But then I realized, well, it's just people sitting in front of a computer trying to scare you.
That's not a very normal thing as a child to have your school get not just one, not just two, but multiple bomb threats. When you kept hearing it happen again and again, what went through your mind?
I think what went through my mind whenever I heard it going again and again, it's repetitive. Like, if it hasn't happened 2 or 3 times, then it's not going to happen the 4th or the 5th.
What's it like for you as a mom to listen to that?
I mean, it's heartbreaking, and no child should ever have to go through one, let alone multiple, and then just feel like it's a normal thing.
Her dad, Joey, had to respond to those threats as a member of the school board.
I mean, I don't know. I think I'm trying to, like, figure out, like, the play.
You can take a deep breath, too. No need to rush through.
Well, no, it's just we trust our people, right? We trust our educators. Like we said, I mean, this is our community. Mm-hmm. So either we trust them or we don't.
The Reyes family is a mix of white, Mexican, and indigenous American. They agreed to give us their honest take.
White people were the first to formally put an end to slavery.
Now, am I saying that this makes white people better than anyone else? Of course not.
What did you think of the perspectives there?
We read this in a book, but something that I noticed was no other culture did anything. No other culture died. No other culture tried to stop slavery, which I know that isn't true.
We also watched Prager characters Leo and Layla, who go back in time to visit historical figures like Christopher Columbus.
I'm sorry, Mr. Columbus, but I heard at school that you spoiled paradise. And you brought slavery and murder to peaceful people. Leo? Sorry. It's what I read and heard at school.
Caramba! Those are some accusations. The place I discovered was beautiful, but it wasn't exactly a paradise of civilization. And the native people were far from peaceful.
So, I definitely think this is pointing towards how Christopher Columbus is a good guy. Second of all, I think I'd really enjoy just watching these at school, but that just kind of stuck in my brain because I liked it more than reading from a book with scratched up pictures.
Makes sense. It's like animation.
Mm-hmm. Clearly, it's just really trying to make him out to be this great person who didn't do anything, in a negative sense. And that's extremely concerning to me.
Back at their Los Angeles headquarters, I asked Dennis Prager if he takes those concerns into account. Take the Christopher Columbus video. The perspective of indigenous people isn't really evident in that video. The video, A Short History of Slavery, the host defends white people's actions, the way in which they fought for abolition, the way in which they died fighting in the Civil War. But at no point do they actually talk about what American slavery was really like. Why leave all that out? If this is about the truth and about additional context, why leave that out?
If you feel that way, I promise you, on camera, we will make a video on how terrible slavery was. Columbus was asked something to the effect of what he thought about slavery, and he defended slavery. Because Columbus did defend slavery.
He sees that emphasis, that framing, as the point.
It's a tough thing to be a good person. That's not taught. And so we don't teach goodness. So perhaps what PragerU has thought, maybe it's really important to teach who did good. Since bad was so ubiquitous, maybe you should learn who did good.
I think teachers would agree with you on that point, that positive histories and heroes are really important for kids to learn about, but not at the expense of the reality of what happened.
I agree with you, and if we do it, then we're guilty. If we don't do it, we're not guilty.
What would a good American education system look like to you?
Like it did in the 1930s, minus anything that was offensive.
All the bad things going on in the 1930s.
Right. Minus the bad things. Yes, that's correct.
I'm trying to absorb 1930s schools, 1930s curriculum, 1930s. I mean, what does that look like?
I still have some questions about that myself, Chuck. What I really understood about Dennis Prager and his larger project is that
in his words, this is all about emphasizing good and goodness in the world, and that there's this battle between good forces and evil forces, and that students need to learn more about the positive aspects of American and Western history here. I think the challenge, though, right, is in a country as diverse and multicultural as ours, when people talk about the history, the founding of this country, to do that, to put that emphasis, it is naturally going to come at the expense of other parts of the reality of history there. And that's what has teachers who I spend time with, educators, even conservative ones who would say they vote for Republicans or agree with Prager on other issues, feeling concerned and unsure about their place in this field and their ability to continue to teach in these conditions.
What kind of credentials does PragerU have? I mean, Dennis Prager himself, was he ever a teacher? Did he ever work in a school system? I mean, I'm just, you know, sometimes some of these outside education firms usually are staffed and founded by people who were steeped in the education system.
I talked to him a bit about that. They are not accredited, and he's actually very proud of that fact. What he told me is that woke universities and woke schools are accredited, and so Prager is proud that his program is not. They see themselves as sort of a supplement, a tool, a turnkey piece of content that teachers can grab and immediately start using in the classroom. And while he may not be a teacher, many of the people he has hired are people who identify as conservative teachers who worked in public or private schools and have come to Prager because they like those values and that message.
Antonia Hilton, this is quite something. Your deep dives on education have been quite enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
Appreciate it. When we come back, we're going to hear from a PragerU supporter, Oklahoma Education Superintendent Ryan Walters, one of the people you saw in Antonia's report, and Francesca Tripodi, a sociologist who is critical of PragerU. Stay with us. Welcome back. As the old expression goes, where you stand on an issue depends on where you sit. And we're about to hear two opposing views on what Dennis Prager is doing. Ryan Walters is Oklahoma's Superintendent of Education. And as you saw in Antonia Hilton's report, he's a big supporter of PragerU. And Francesca Tripodi is a sociologist who has studied the use of search engines by conservatives to help with indoctrination. She is also the author of The Propagandist's Playbook. Welcome to both of you. Ryan, I'm going to start with you. Why is the answer to what you believe might be liberal indoctrination going to the far right and conservative like Dennis Prager?
Well, what I would say, Chuck, is what we have seen for the last several decades is a push from higher education to drive radical left-wing Marxist propaganda into the classroom. What we've heard from parents for decades is we want our kids to understand American exceptionalism. We want them to understand what makes this country great. And we want it done in a way that our kids can grasp it. We want it to be very tangible. I think PragerU has done a tremendous job in sort of a modern day Federalist Papers to say, here's the Constitution, here's these core concepts. We want to make it very attainable for kids to understand it. And let's keep moving towards this.
Look, I've read all the Federalist Papers. Federalist Papers actually go weigh both sides of an argument. Sure. PragerU doesn't. Oh, I mean, PragerU, these videos are very, you know, are very sort of a one perspective only. And that's why I'm confused by this. I understand. Look, I grew up in a bipartisan household. I grew up in a household where my father was complaining about the textbooks. But it was about getting all the perspectives. Prager only is doing one. It seems to me it's the same issue that you should be complaining about, the left's doing, that the right's doing.
No, you see, and I hear this some from the left-wing media, but Chuck, I know, I hear your show.
You're not on left-wing media,
I know.
I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I'm saying, you dive into these issues, and you know, when we take a look at PragerU, what we're doing, it's a call back to the primary sources to do a deep dive. I've watched these videos, and they're available to the public. Parents have been asking for it. PragerU is a response to what Americans have been asking for. We want to see
it's a great tool for parents. Yes, well, why should it be forced into the schools? It's a political agenda.
No, I reject that. What we see here is our schools have been pushing this left-wing ideology for decades. It's time to get back to the basics.
Were you pushing a left-wing ideology?
I absolutely was not.
So
I saw
then
that.
You're one of the. The point is, I hear this, and yet that isn't what you talk to teachers, and it's a lot more of a nuanced conversation than the way you're presenting it.
Chuck, we literally have these, social media accounts like Libs for TikTok that go viral with teachers' own words about how they're injecting this ideology in the classroom. Higher ed has become run amok with Marxists that are pushing this ideology on our kids. It's anti-American.
What's Marxism?
Marxism.
Define it for me, please.
It's Karl Marx's belief that you've got to supplement the family entirely. You've got to have a socialist takeover of the economy. And not only that, but there's the socialist...
And our school system is teaching there should be a socialist takeover of the economy? The American school system?
Absolutely.
Where?
Chuck, you've seen the videos of the teachers on camera saying we're doing that. You've seen the curriculum in our schools saying that as well. And you've seen, by the way, the response to the American people in electing President Trump was a repudiation of this. They want to make America great again. And that starts with an understanding what made America great in the first place. That's what I see PragerU doing, and that's what I think we've got to be doing in our schools.
All right, Francesca, you call it propaganda. I mean, look, it isn't part of the problem here. We're assuming everybody has got evil intent here.
Sure. I think it's very first important to define the words that we're using, right? So when I use the phrase propaganda, propaganda is about uniting individuals, brands, and nations into a common conversation, whether that be deceitful and sometimes truthful information. But the goal is to shape an agenda around a very specific conversation.
I worry about the use of the word, because the minute you say the word, everybody gets defensive, right? You get defensive. You use the word propaganda, you're like, one person's propagandist is another person's truth-telling.
Absolutely. And I think it's important for us to, though, think about this phrase indoctrination as well, right? So indoctrination is about uncritical thinking. And I would say that's the opposite of what's happening in schools. Schools are not about teaching kids what to think. They're about teaching kids how to think. And what's concerning to me about videos like PragerU is that we're effectively saying, hey, kids, go to YouTube. Let's go to TikTok. Let's go to YouTube. And the thing about Prager University is that it does not exist in a vacuum. Nothing on the internet does. These kinds of videos are algorithmically connected to the other guests that they have on their videos. Many of these guests have their own shows, their own agenda. And so when we advocate for something that's effectively a YouTube channel, we have to be really mindful about where that journey might lead our children.
Whose responsibility is, though, to deal with this social media issue?
Whose responsibility is it to deal with the
social media companies? I mean, you see what I mean here? I mean, these algorithms, you're right.
Oh, absolutely.
So, like, how is it that it is, are you saying that school systems shouldn't use this stuff because of how it can be manipulated?
I think it's very concerning whenever you have educators supplementing curriculum, because curriculum has been tested. It's pedagogical. Our teachers go to school to learn how to become educators. I wouldn't advocate to replace schools with TED Talks either, right? Schools are meant to inform and educate. Now, when it comes to regulating content on social media and search engines, I think we have a couple different things that we need to think about. One, we have to think about that these search engines and these social media companies are in fact companies. They're not designed for the public good. They're designed for the bottom line.
Yeah, ABC Mouse still charges me money. Okay, I mean, I'm sure you got, once you subscribe, you can't seem to get out of it. My kids are in college.
Absolutely, absolutely, right? So this is a monetization model, and that's not public education. And so I think it's very important we differentiate between those two things.
I want to go back to what I would assume you really want to do, and I say this, I'm not trying to question your motives here, which is take politics out of the education.
Yes, sir.
How does bringing Dennis Prager in take politics out?
If you look at the content, what you see is a deep dive into American history. What you see is a way to get kids interested and excited about America and these figures in America. And it's always pointing to more questions. And that's what we've got to do. We have got to teach kids how to think, not what to think. I think these videos...
This was an agreement here. I was just going to say, you both used good language here. I completely agree. How to teach kids how to think, not what to think. So we do agree on that.
And I want to say, we're talking about PragerU's motives. Let's talk about the teachers union have had so much power over our schools. They tell you they're pushing a left-wing agenda. They tell you that that's the content they want in schools. They actively are motivated by those goals. So they are actively pushing these things in our schools. So that's where it's been. PragerU is bringing it back to going, let's do a deep dive in history and let's have these conversations.
I mean, with all due respect, I think it's important that we listen to our teachers. And my mom was a teacher and I'm a teacher. And from what I can tell, the teachers are not out there trying to push an agenda. The teachers are trying to survive. Our teachers are underpaid. Our teachers are undervalued. There is a huge shortage of teachers across our country.
Universities right now are having to create a fast-track education degree to fill
to
gaps.
try and fill gaps.
Because there's massive, you know this, right? You look for teachers right now, I bet.
And we know that teachers are leaving the education field, not because they don't have the degrees, but because they are underpaid. And so I think it's really important that we take a step back and really listen to our teachers. If we want to fix the challenges in the education system, which I think we all do, right? We have to listen to our teachers. We have to empower our teachers.
Go ahead.
We've had the largest teacher recruitment program in state history this year. We've recruited over 900 teachers to our state using free market principles. And by the way, pointing out, we're not going to allow unions to control our schools. We're going to get discipline back in schools. And we're going to bring resources like PragerU to the classroom. We have been very open about that, and we've recruited a record amount of teachers to the classroom.
But by bringing PragerU, and I keep coming back to this, again, I respect your concern about liberal politics. Why don't you respect the concern about bringing conservative politics into the classroom?
Well, what's conservative about a deep dive into Thomas Jefferson? What's conservative about the deep dive into Federalist Papers? Conservatives hold this.
Not what I saw with Christopher Columbus. That didn't seem like much of an education. That just seemed like an op-ed in a cartoon form.
It was an introduction to Christopher Columbus to get kids to start asking questions about what was Columbus's impact. And I believe, Chuck, this to be common sense. We can get back to a place in education. I hear it from parents all the time. We want curriculum we can see. We want our kids to understand what makes America great. Because frankly, that's what we want for the future of the country. But you see the reaction to it from the radical left. It is because the Prager University is actually bringing education back to the basics and saying, let's have the conversations about Christopher Columbus. But we're not just going to come in here and say these people are terrible individuals. We're going to look at their accomplishments, and we're going to weigh those things out, and we're going to view it all through the prism of American exceptionalism and our core principles and say, did they live up to the principles or did they not? That's a great conversation.
So you believe there should be a biased education in America? That if somebody chooses to have a conservative education in Oklahoma for their kids, that's what they should be able to have?
I believe that we need, I'm a supporter of school choice where I want parents to be able to choose the school that their kids attend.
Do you think we should be educating kids based on political ideology?
No, I think we should get back to the basics, Chuck, where we're actually talking about these issues. We're bringing them to the kids' attention and going, here's George Washington, here's what he did. And we've got to be able to acknowledge the Founding Fathers forever changed the course of human events with the Declaration of Independence. It was a great document. We shouldn't be afraid to say that in our schools.
Francesca, should we be trying to teach a liberal perspective, a conservative perspective, and then reality?
I mean, I think really what I would like to do is go back to this conversation of teaching students the basics and teaching kids the basics. This assumes that curriculum exists in a vacuum and that it just never changes and that we have no tools like science to evaluate how people learn and what kinds of things should we be learning. I mean, my kids come home with math lessons. Math has changed dramatically, and that doesn't mean...
Yeah,
right. I mean, we have this
finally
joke.
Teaching it logically by tens.
Sure.
We should have been taught
They're
that way.
teaching it logically, and we should have done it. But is it confusing to me? Absolutely.
Right.
Do I understand it? No way. But just because I don't understand how this model of math is now transforming education and really improving the way that my kids learn, that doesn't mean that it's bad. And what's really powerful and really wonderful about, we think that a free tool like PragerU seems really compelling. I understand why it seems compelling. There's no cost, right, to the educator. But I think we have to be really mindful of the fact that by giving this free resource, we are effectively going to a monetization content that we don't have any kind of control over. You know, the curriculum is very highly controlled. Teachers have to teach to a set of standards that they end up being assessed by. Teachers can't just make up whatever they want to teach. And so I think it's important to understand that even though curriculum is evolving and even though curriculum doesn't seem familiar to us, that doesn't mean it's wrong.
Let me ask you this. If parents don't want PragerU taught in a school that they're sending their kid to, what should they do?
Look, we've made it available so that all schools, parents, teachers can look at it. We encourage more conversations with parents in the school. That's what we've got to get back to. And this is where we've just lost our way, Chuck. Common sense is bringing parents into a school, having conversations, bringing curriculum to the table, having these open and transparent discussions with parents. We've sacrificed common sense at the altar of higher ed. Higher ed has pushed this radicalism.
Let me ask you this. How would you teach the Tulsa Race Massacre? Because you were a history teacher.
Yes, sir. I'll tell you how I taught it.
Right.
I taught it as it was an evil, racist event. And let me tell you something. They weren't racist because of the color of their skin, those white individuals.
How do you know
they were I don't believe people are inherently racist, but they chose to be racist. They chose to be racist, and that's the discussion you have with young people. Those individuals chose an evil racist ideology and they acted that way. And we need to learn the lessons from that. That's how I taught it. That's how we tell the state to teach it. You've got to make sure people understand the evils of racism, and we absolutely need to acknowledge that. Our kids need to know it.
Okay.
I mean, absolutely, racism is evil. We can all agree on that. I think the difference, though, is that we can't just think that it's some individual person acting as a racist. We also have to understand how racism becomes embedded into different structures, like our school system, right? How resources are allocated to schools. These are predicated on a long history of racism. And if we don't learn and understand those lessons, it's really challenging for us to make the kinds of shifts that I think we want to see.
Funding schools with property taxes just creates the haves and have-nots right there.
Absolutely.
I mean, that is not, it turned out, it was a unique idea, but it turned out it created inequality, right?
It created inequality, and it also perpetuated a lot of problems that we're facing today. And that's not because one group of people was like, I'm a racist, I'm evil, right? This is embedded into how the school system runs in the United States.
I mentioned what makes American exceptional. What made American exceptional is the founders' belief in a Judeo-Christian value set, individual liberty, and the belief that America, if we truly tell people that those individual liberties, that you are capable of self-determination, we can do great things. The country's done great things. We've got to get back to that in our schools.
Some of us believe the beauty of America is that we're willing to admit when we were wrong.
I mean, I think this is
and that is when that's what made us different than every other. What makes American exceptional is when we know we've done poorly and we try to do better the next time, a more perfect union.
And it starts with an understanding of the principles and then judging our history in accordance with those principles.
Go ahead, Francesca. Sorry.
I mean, no, not at all. I was just saying, I think what Ryan is saying here is really indicative of why PragerU videos are appealing, right? They provide this nostalgia for a past that never really existed. And so if we are saying, oh, we need to get back to teaching schools like it's 1930, that doesn't recognize schools were segregated in 1930. And we need to recognize that.
I'm going to leave it there. The classroom is turning into quite the polarized debate place. Anyway, thank you both. It was very respectful, and I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah,
that's all we have for this episode of Meet the Press Reports. And this also wraps up our 7th season of this. Remember, you can see all of our Meet the Press Reports episodes, these 30-minute deep dives that we know regular television doesn't have the time to do. Catch it all, Peacock or on YouTube. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm Chuck Todd.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.